We have a lot of NHL news to cover in today's video, including some potential trades by the Blackhawks as they go into full-scale rebuild this offseason. Plus, we have a suspension, a fine, some injuries. We have a major suspension coming out of the Hobey Baker winner from U.S. college hockey. We have a major lawsuit in Philadelphia. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety and a lot of NHL news to talk about here today. First up, we have a couple of items from NHL player safety. Habs forward Michael Pezzetta has been suspended for 2 games following an illegal check to the head against the Washington Capitals the other night against TJ Oshie. So obviously they've deemed this to be an illegal check to the head. He doesn't really have prior history being a relatively new player, but it certainly was deemed a hit to the head, which they're always calling nowadays. So he'll serve 2 games for that. And Islanders forward Matthew Barzal has been fined $2,500, which was a little bit comical in my opinion. On Saturday night, the Islanders were playing the Maple Leafs. At one point during the game, Mitch Marner was right in front of the Islander bench, and Matthew Barzal grabbed a hold of his jersey as he tried to skate away. He couldn't go. Obviously, it's against the rules. It's illegal. It's, for all intents and purposes, you could call it interference. You could call it unsportsmanlike. I mean, the fine's really not a big deal. And I think it's mainly a fine because nothing came of it from the on-ice officials. But really, it's not a big deal. I know Mitch Marner was asked about it in a post-game interview, and he kind of jokingly said, I hope he gets fined for it. So he has been. Anyways, it's really a very minor deal. I'm not really entirely sure it's worth fining. I guess if the referees would have picked up on it during the game, they could have called a bench minor or something like that, and probably wouldn't have happened. But either way, that is a part of NHL player safety's job for today. We had a quick signing in Buffalo, a top prospect of theirs from the 2021 NHL draft, 3rd-round draft pick Josh Bloom, who's a winger in the OHL, who just put up a 30-goal season, gets his 3-year entry-level contract. Now, a few items from injury updates here. Dylan Larkin, captain of the Red Wings, is done for the season. He's going to be out for about 10 weeks, requiring core muscle surgery. I believe the surgery's already been completed and has been considered successful. Now the recovery begins. So certainly, like I said, Detroit started off real good this year, and the second half has just been an absolute disaster. You could really see where I guess the inexperience was really showing up in a lot of areas, and then of course things like this keep happening, which is just making matters worse. So I know, like, early on, some people kind of questioned, could they challenge for playoffs? But obviously they're going to finish a long ways out. And in my opinion, teams that are right, next to them in the standings, like Buffalo, Ottawa, I'm not even sure that they're really ahead of them when it comes to their rebuild. So it'll be interesting to see how those 3 teams do next year, how they're all kind of in different stages of that rebuild and kind of moving forward, trying to challenge for playoffs. So we'll see where that goes. Be interesting to watch in the coming couple of seasons. Now, we also had a odd scenario here pop up that we didn't really know about. This has been going on behind the scenes for some time, but most people didn't know. But the Hobey Baker winner, goaltender Dryden McKay of Minnesota State, has been suspended for 6 months by the anti-doping agency here for an anti-doping violation. So certainly, it could have been a lot worse. A lot of times in these scenarios, they're given a 4-year ban, but his was reduced to 6 months because they were able to determine where the banned substance came from, and it was certainly nothing intentional. It was believed that they figured out it came from, I think, based on an article, it sounded like a vitamin supplement. So essentially, he hired a lawyer pretty quick. They got digging into things, trying to figure things out, and they had a vitamin sample that he had been recently started taking sent to a lab, and it came back. So it was wrongly labeled, or obviously wrongly marked, and so it's not his fault. So they cut him a break on that front. Of course, that's testing he went under back in January when he was going to be a part of Team USA for the Olympics. And of course, it takes time to go through all this and an investigation to be complete. He's been stressed about it clearly, but it's something that wasn't really brought up publicly. He didn't even tell his teammates until the last week or two, I think it was. Now, he's a pending unrestricted free agent too, so he's played his 4 years in college hockey, and he's ready to turn pro. And it was reported that there was a lot of interest from a variety of NHL teams. And as we saw, a lot of other college free agents getting signed. Of course, many of you probably have noticed his name has not come up. And there was some speculation that I seen last week indicating that there was a reason and kind of something was up, but really had no idea what that could have been. So I figured we'll just wait and see, and now here we go. So it's understandable that teams would have wanted to wait, because if this ban was going to be more severe, they certainly were not going to, give the guy a chance. So he'll be eligible to play come October the 11th. He can start practicing a little bit before that, I think, at the end of September. So clearly that's not going to be too big of a deal. I'm sure an NHL team is likely now going to give him a contract. He'll start at the American Hockey League level most likely and see if he can earn himself an opportunity to move up into the NHL. But certainly not something you see very often. Somebody winning the Hobey Baker Trophy and then short time later testing positive or being acknowledged about a banned substance and getting suspended. So a real big deal that almost got way worse for the young goaltender, but fortunately they could figure things out and cut himself a little bit of a break in the process by doing so. Now, we also got word today on Team Canada's brass for the upcoming World Championship tournament in Finland in the month of May. We know now that Shane Doan, which we already suspected Shane Doan was going to be the GM, but that's now been confirmed. One of his assistant GMs will be Rick Nash. Of course, Nash and Doan have won gold for Canada together before, so certainly interesting to see Nash get more involved in the executive level here as well. A couple of guys that I think long-term, not sure how quickly, but could see themselves in NHL management circles. The head coach is going to be Claude Julien. Of course, was coaching for the Olympic team, and he will be assisted by Ottawa Senators coach DJ Smith and Arizona Coyotes coach Andre Tourigny. Of course, Tourigny has a long history and success with Team Canada in the past in a variety of roles. And I believe this is the first time for DJ Smith with Team Canada, but obviously a lot of the young players in Ottawa has taken a big step forward this year, and they obviously didn't have quite the season they were hoping for, but they've seen a lot of growth in a lot of their young players, and there's a lot of things going in the right direction. To me, if they could have surrounded those young players with pro scouting, doing their job better, getting some more solid vets in the lineup, this team would have been a lot better this year. So I think it's nice to see DJ Smith get a little bit of recognition for a job well done. Wouldn't be shocking to see some of Ottawa's players follow him, like Drake Batherson, Thomas Chabot, maybe Connor Brown. You just never know. They've all had various levels of interactions and success with Team Canada in the past. And of course, we'll see. I'm not sure if any of the Coyotes players will head along with Andre Tourigny at this point. The Seattle Kraken also announced today that there's been some adjustments to their ownership stake. They have a couple of new minority owners who have bought in and invested here with the team. And of course, they're both pretty famous, and they're both famous to the Seattle area. And that's Marshawn Lynch and Macklemore, of course. Both famous in their own right for very different things, of course. But certainly interesting. I know they showed a clip of them two in a dressing room with Kraken jerseys on. I think Marshawn Lynch was on the Zamboni. So they're certainly nice to see some more local people, of course, athletes, musicians being involved here with this franchise. So we'll see. I'm sure they won't regret the investment, because that team is likely going to grow a ton in value here over the next number of years. Now, as I mentioned as well, we also have some pretty significant news out of Philadelphia. We have a pretty significant lawsuit that's been filed against the Philadelphia Flyers organization, against Comcast and against all the different group of some subsidiary companies that they have, that they work for them in a variety of ways. And it's from two trainers. We got Jim McCrossan, who's 64 years old, the director of medical services, as well as Sal Rafa, who's 42 years old. And they've both, within a short period of time throughout the spring and summer of 2021, been diagnosed with identical and incurable blood disease or cancers, which is kind of rare to see. Now, they've done their investigation. They've hired a law firm, and they are alleging that it's excessive exposure to a cancer-causing carcinogen emitted from Zambonis that they're exposed to a lot at the practice facility. There's also some mentioned of poor ventilation and other workplace conditions that essentially have caused this exposure and have both made them extremely ill. And of course, things like this, as I mentioned, are incurable. So it's certainly not something you want to see these guys be going through. I mean, it's, you don't want to see anybody go through it, but these are the kind of guys that are unheralded heroes in NHL circles that really have a major role looking after players. The training staff for all the NHL clubs do a tremendous job and are really second to none with looking after everybody. It's not just what you see for them going on the ice with players when they're injured or things like that. Like, they do a lot for those players, and for them to constantly be giving and then, to have this happen is an exceptionally sad story. It's really, it's really upsetting to see that workplace conditions could cause something like this. I'm not sure how this kind of oversight and overlook by the Flyers organization could happen, but they're alleging that it indeed has. I know the Flyers, all they put out for a comment so far is that they've been aware of these allegations, they're aware of the lawsuit, and that they felt that their accusations have no merit, but that's all they're able to say at this time, where it's still tied up in litigation. So certainly, like I said, not something you expect to hear. Not the kind of lawsuit I was expecting to hear. When I saw the headline about a lawsuit against the Flyers, I was like, okay, what's going on here? And I was like, wow, this is really concerning. This is really upsetting. Like, things like this should not be happening, period, for any NHL franchise. So I guess we'll see where this goes. And I hope that these two guys do well with their battles against these diseases that they've been dealing with. And certainly it does seem like it's probably not a coincidence where they both got pretty much the same thing so close together after working closely together for an extended time, and have been around this stuff. They're probably onto something here, but I'm no lawyer or medical person to really justify or be able to say what's what here. Of course, no knowledge of that working environment either, but time will tell. Be interesting to see where this goes as well. Now, as I mentioned, could we see a substantial Hawks teardown continue this offseason? We saw it kind of begin here a little bit throughout the season in the NHL trade deadline, but I've come across another article here from the Chicago Sun-Tribune by Ben Pope, outlining some more reasons why Jonathan Toews very well might be acceptable to a trade this coming off season. That might just be the tip of the iceberg for the captain to leave town. Certainly, he's made a lot of comments lately about the team not having any kind of connections. He's also had a lot of outspoken complaints about the team having several meetings recently where the coaching staff has really talked about not checking out mentally. Of course, once you're eliminated from the playoffs, I'm sure it's a bit challenging, especially for the more competitive guys and the veterans on the team, to kind of keep pushing hard and playing your hardest and your best every night. There's a lot of good reasons why. For one, you're a paid professional. Number two, a lot of these people are playing for jobs and contracts, etc. Some of these guys are a little bit more better off financially and don't have to worry about all that, like Toews, Kane. I'm sure that for them it could be a challenge, but a lot of that boils down to their competitive spirit and just, the kind of people they are, I guess. A lot of people that are athletes and competitive by nature, doesn't matter what the stakes are, they never want to lose, and it's just easy for them to keep pushing and keep going. But I'm sure there are some that do have their challenges with that, but that's something he hasn't been overly thrilled about. Derek King, the head coach, has made mention that essentially he said basically Toews needs to kind of think about this differently, that there's a lot of young players on the team and that they need these kind of meetings and they need these kind of reminders where the veterans may not, but it's something that you do as a team. Just quite that simple. And apparently back in March as well, Toews has kind of for the first time made comments publicly acknowledging that he wondered what it would be like to play for a different franchise. So it's the first time you're hearing a lot of these things out of Jonathan Toews. It certainly seems like this article makes reference, and of course they need to have access to players more than we would ever see behind the scenes, that Jonathan Toews hasn't really seen like himself for quite some time. It seems like the losing has really been getting to him, and that it just kind of looks like he might be more willing to consider moving on. Will he request a trade this offseason? It's hard to say, but he's also made it known that he wants to sit down more frequently with GM Kyle Davidson to talk about the direction, talk about the future, and all these things. So you have to think that it's bound to happen more, especially with the season not too far away from being over. And this teardown is likely going to continue. I mean, they made it known that they're going into full-scale rebuild. They don't know how long it's going to take. They wouldn't even put a timeline on it. I would think it's probably fair to say it could be looking at 4 or 5 years. And guys like Jonathan Toews, Patrick Kane, very likely need to move on. They're not likely going to be offered a new contract once the current ones expire if they don't leave now before the next season starts or before the contracts are up. So you might as well let the team get something in return and go finish out your days on another franchise. At least that's what I think it looks like the Hawks kind of want, but we'll see on that. I mean, another few players mentioned in this article that are likely going to be possibly moved on would be goalie Kevin Lankinen. Not a given that he gets moved. They might decide to bring him back because clearly winning is not going to be their top priority. They're going to be focusing on developing their young players, and they need a goalie, and if he's willing to stay for the right price, maybe, but they haven't been overly thrilled with his lack of consistency, so it is possible that Lankinen could move. Tyler Johnson's another player with a couple of years left. They'd probably have to retain 50% of his salary, and even then, no guarantee that it gets done, but they could also consider a buyout, but there's a really good chance they're going to see what they can do to move on from Tyler Johnson here as well. I mean, I know he probably would be interested in heading back to Seattle, which is kind of like home for him, so maybe they work something up there. I don't know. There was a lot of speculation about the Kraken maybe having interest ahead of the expansion draft, but obviously that never came to be. So interesting times in Chicago for sure. Obviously, we've already seen a fair bit of change, and that is going to continue. It's just a matter of who all goes. I wouldn't completely rule out players like Dylan Strome and Alex DeBrincat being traded, but I think they're probably just young enough for right now and playing well enough that they can kind of be the new veterans, if you will, to kind of lead this team for the next little while and incorporate more and more youth as they continue to accumulate draft picks and work their already existent draft players into their organizational lineup here to get more experience so they can hopefully move forward in a few years' time. But obviously I'm sure the existing staff there probably regret some of the moves Stan Bowman made last year because they really made a lot of moves with a kind of quick retool in mind and intentions to go for it by bringing in Fleury and Seth Jones and everything, and it completely backfired. Of course, we had the whole, Kyle Beach incident play out. A lot of people get fired, and it's just been a really, odd year in Chicago, and it's time for significant change, and I think it has to start with their two top veteran players playing out the string somewhere else. Patrick Kane won't have an issue getting traded if he wants to move somewhere. There's no doubt. They retain 50% of Kane. He'll go in a heartbeat. Jonathan Toews will be more challenging, but I do think that he could be rejuvenated and play a lesser role somewhere else for 1 year, and it might be worth his while. Hard to say how long he keeps playing after that. It just really boils down to his desire to play, but time will tell. It'll be an interesting summer in Chicago, which is not far away. Their offseason officially will kick in here in a couple of weeks' time. So let me know your thoughts on everything discussed down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.